databases I've been that I've gone to, and you can toggle in between. But if I want to create a brand new one, and I'm just going to call this 2024 Q2 training. Brand new. So this is a brand new database. First thing I recommend, if you haven't done so, is when you open up or you start using the program, go to Tools, Preferences, Internet Settings. This is where you can put in your company name, obviously your name, your company email address, work number. That way, when you need any kind of support, whether or not it's just a basic question, it's always best, even if you don't think it's relevant, to send us your data file. And this is the way to do it. Sometimes we've had clients that will take the entire database, the DF2, and attach it and send it to our email. But the problem about that is that system preferences, differences in software version, if we open up a database, a DF2 file that you send, when we open it up, it will convert to, our preferences, our system preferences, the version number of the version of the program. So, and sometimes the issue can be you're running a very old version of the program. It could be you decided to change the rounding options in your system preference, and you're producing a different, say, interest amount. Obviously, we pull it up, we start to run it, and we go, well, no, it's fine on our end. And that just that's a lot of back and forth. So, and I'll show you how easy it is here in a minute. So when you create your data file, whether it's brand new, within, I know it says issuers, but just think of this as a DF2, it's the data file, it's the 2024 Q2 training. This is where within each data file, you can create as many issuers as you want. And then within each issuer, you can create as many different actual series, proposed series, refundings, project finance modules, which is multi-purpose deals that we cover really in a couple of weeks. But today is going to be strictly kind of debt size and refunding. So if I click new, up to 8 characters long, you can do underscore. It won't allow you to do stuff like a slash or a times symbol. But if I just said, I'm just going to do something about, I'm trying to stick to a little bit within also our tutorials, which I'll show you in a few moments. I've noticed, at least if we cover not only what's covered in the tutorials, but also things that are not covered in the tutorials. That way, if you haven't done so, which you should have, you can always go into the help tutorial sections, and that can kind of give you a refresh of, oh, I remember during the training when we went over this part, so forth. So again, we can create as many different issuers. And then within each issuer is when you can start to create your proposed, your actuals, the different types of modules. So if I click on new, and like any other Windows-based product, you can do, if you like to use your mouse, right mouse click pulls up a menu. Obviously, you have, showing you can scroll up and down. Also control, it's just the F5 pulls up a menu as well. Let's say that was a mistake. You can always right mouse click and delete it. You can edit. So there's a number of, like any other Windows-based product, there's different ways of pulling up menus, whether it's right mouse click, F5 key, and or there's buttons that you can scroll and or click on.
Excuse me. Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So in the DBC tool, I've opened it up, but it's not letting me create a new data file. It's only wanting me to open pre-existing data files. Do you know why that would be occurring?
Yes, you click on data file, go to browse directory, and then you can just type in a name under file name and then click open, and that will create a brand new one. I would probably suggest, though, if you could certainly try to create as you go along, just through history of being with the company since 99. It seems like if you focus all your time just trying to copy, may miss some stuff, but I need to just to let you know on that. But yes, on the data file, you just click browse directory, and this goes for anytime you want to start a brand new data file. You can obviously decide where you want to save it up here, but if you just give it a name and click open, it will show this. It will open it up for you. All right.
Got it. Thank you.
Correct. No problem. No problem. So let's see. All right. Getting back. Let's see. Why is that not? Yeah. I'm just going to delete this. All right. New. So let's create a new proposed series. So let's say it's a 2024 new money. Status propose. Click OK. There's not an automatic save feature, meaning if you're entering in information, the program won't auto just on its own just save. That's really a mechanism that's intentional. You don't want to open up a series and let's say you want to play around with yields and stuff like that, and you say, oh, let's see what the outcome is, and then all of a sudden it saves it. Again, you always go to File and Save As, Control S. You'll see it at the very bottom here. It's so quick, you don't even see a lot of times the hourglass that appears. Control S will save it. I'd get used to that, just to make sure. And I've been guilty of this. I remember it was probably, in the early 2000s when I did a lot of trainings, and I would stress this. And then I was doing some consulting work, and after an hour or so, my computer just froze up, and so I'd start all over. So I even had to learn, practice what I preach. So the program, though, is set up to where it's as logical as possible, plus all of the default settings are what's either most commonly solved off from or used, and are off of any kind of regulations. For example, generally you're going to want to put in general bond information, then create the bonds themselves, then any kind of construction funds, reserve, cap buy, expenses, are they callable, miscellaneous reporting or other debt service. Finally, how do you want to solve it? So go in here, and let's just say it's 6/1/2024, right? And then it's 12/1/2024. You'll notice the font color is different. This is um, this is important in that when you start running numbers, you want to know what you've hard coded in versus what the program has produced. And this is a lot more important, let's say, when we start creating the bond components. Um, and we get this quite a bit from support. It's, how come I'm not getting, for example, level debt service in the first year? Um, we'd open up, go into the bond component, go in the maturity structure tab, and we'll see a blue amount, whether it's zero or some kind of amount. That means you or someone who's has access has hard coded that in. And the program's going to assume anything you hard code in, regardless if it makes sense or if it's not going to assume you made a mistake. Um, so again, you're solving level debt service. In the first year, you hard code some amount, whether it's zero or some kind of amount greater than that. It's not going to think, well, you made a mistake. Program's going to unprotect and show you. So what you have to do is basically unprotect or delete it and then calculate the program. Another great thing is, I believe, long time ago, well, at least when I started, we had support. We had to pick up phones and try to do a lot of support over the phone. But our help menu, anywhere in the program, hit the F1 key. It will open up directly in that specific area of the program. And a lot of times, especially if it's not between 9 and 6 Eastern time, Monday through Friday, a lot of times in an area, if you're not quite sure what's what something will do or what it means, majority of times if you hit the F1 key, it's not like Excel or some other programs or a paperclip and you got to type in, it gives you a big library and then you give up. It will open up right there. So if you had questions about is it 360 day 6 day counts for leap years, how do I know? Hit F1, it will show you. A few other areas, we do have an FAQ, and we didn't decide, hey, let's make up FAQs and put them in here. We haven't really added an FAQ in a while now. I think we've pretty much covered it. But a lot of times when you send us your file, not only will we show you how to correct or solve your question, but if it fits under an FAQ, we may also add it as well. And some are very easy, very simple in nature, and then some can be fairly complex on how to set up. Um, so it's not, we're just going to put a bunch of basic stuff or a bunch of advanced. These are, we get a number of the same question asked multiple times from different clients. One of us writes it up, and then in the next release, we add it. But again, it's been a while since we've added an FAQ. That's something I would recommend. F1 key anywhere in the program, click on FAQ. Anything from, how do I enter in cabs to how do I size a taxable tail? Um, Finally, glossary. We'll get this quite a bit. Well, somebody will send us their file and say, hey, my reserve fund's 125% of average annual adjusted debt service. Well, when I calculated average annual adjusted debt service, I'm getting this amount. Why is the program giving a different amount? Well, go to glossary and we'll give you that formula. Finally, we do have a search. I would say NLF would be probably one of the uh, times that I would maybe use search. Natural language format. This is, how do you enter in formulas? How do you, And we provide a number of examples. Some are fairly easy, some can be fairly complex. So this is just kind of a touch up here, F1 key, all right? Cost of issuance, underwriter's discount. I'm going to show you a different area where to create your issuance costs, as well as costs that are not part of COI or underwriter's discount, only because, as you can see, unless you're doing, very somewhat, I would say, basic deals that um, I would probably stay away from using these two tabs. One reason is it has to fit under one of these prompts, dollar per $1,000 par amount, percentage of par, or some kind of amount in thousands. So if it doesn't fit under one of those three, you can't do it there anyway. Another issue is if you click OK, you don't see any icon in the general area. So you don't really know, or nobody else really knows, it's fairly hidden. And finally, and this happens, if you do have access to project finance, a lot of times we'll get someone sent us their project finance module. Let's say it has 6 different series attached to it. And they'll say, yes, let's say they've got 10 different itemized cost of issuance and underwriter's discount. And they'll say, look, I know I created this in each series. I really need to create it on the project finance level and then allocate it a certain way across all series. Well, because it's not an icon, you basically have to go into each series, delete it, and start from scratch. And we'll get to that in the expense section. Right? Bond components. So let's say we'll go, let's see, 30, let's see, 50, about 54. Again, update characters long. The short name or long name, if you name it term bond, it doesn't know it's calculated as a term bond. So it's just for naming purposes only, showing up in certain reports. As you can see, the default, that's why it's always good to start from debt size assumption setup, because automatically when you start creating the bond components, it will auto-populate from your general dates. By default, more times than not, semi-annual, 3360, paid until maturity date. It wouldn't make sense if, for example, the default is set to a serial cab or a serial convertible cab. All right. This is going to determine whether or not the information we enter in maturity structure is going to be a serial or a term bond, priced to the actual maturities or just priced to the final maturity. So click on maturity structure, gives us a nice enter dates box that you can enter. If you accidentally hit cancel, again, right mouse click or F5, go back to enter dates, right? So we could say 6/1/25 to 6/1/54. If these are semi-annual or something other than annual, you can make that change. If they fall on the first business day of each year, you can make that change. And this will automatically add. Now, you can also copy, paste from Excel. You can, if I right mouse click and go copy down, I could add, plus 7 days if I wanted to. If I go, no, that's not what I meant to do. I could do plus 12 months. And this goes for rates. You can, and this is covered, and I'll show you in the tutorials, but if I said, plus 0.025 all the way down. What's key about this is, remember I was mentioning anything in blue. So if I type that, And then down the road, I'm running the numbers and I'm going, why am I not producing any par in the first year? Or why am I getting a weird structuring in the first year versus all the others? I'll go back in here and go up 0. I can delete or right mouse click and go unprotect. The key thing here, hard code in 2 out of the 3 if these are not par bonds. For example, if I could right mouse click and say protect, but if you went in here and went like that doesn't make sense. So when you calculate, it will give you a warning message. It'll tell you you've protected rate, yield, price. Make sure the results are accurate. Verify the reports. So even if you think they are, I would, so if this was 0.95, gives you some kind of a premium, I would still not recommend going in here and protecting it, only because if you're even slightly off and the numbers aren't accurate, it may even get past you because it's not going to give you an error message. It's going to say, look, it's calculated. Make sure and verify the reports. Hit the delete key or right mouse click on protect, and it will snap back. Take down per maturity. This is in, instead of an overall average takedown, you'd enter it in here. By default, these are in 5,000 denoms. You'll notice numbers starting to appear anywhere in the program except generally itemized expenses. You're going to hard code the amount in thousands. Now, if you have specific draw amounts and a cap buy, or some kind of an amount that you want to either add or subtract out of a reserve fund, those will also need to be entered in to the penny. But programming purposes, to make the program as fast as possible, anywhere else, if you're hard coding, if you say I want, 5, so that's 5,000, right? And this goes for, let's say, a project fund, and I'll show you that. If it's a 200 million, you type in 200,000. Minimum amount, anything off the screen when you have to start scrolling, generally we know there's enough information when you're starting off using the program to have to enter in or set up. So, we try and put options that are just not as commonly used, generally not in the general viewing area. VAR, this is a variant. For example, if this is a bifurcated maturity, and let's say the first two are at 6/125, they have different rates. You'd have to, if it's in the same component, you'd have to give it a different variant. But again, we have a warning message that tells you that as well. I would say about the only area that's not in the general viewing that you may use more times than not is if you do a lot of variable rate deals. So just like having to scroll off the main screen, advanced areas generally are areas where you're just not going to go into on a typically a regular basis. But obviously, if you do a lot of variable rate deals, this is where you would go. Advance within the specific bond component into the variable rate table. All right. So, save. Let's do a couple of term bonds. Let's say it's 59. So what's important here is each term bond is set up in a separate bond component. So all you do is make this change. 6,155, 6,159. So by making this change, we're saying this is one term bond, matures in 2059. These are sinking fund payment dates starting in 55. Let's just say this is a 2. Obviously, the rate yields price need to be the same for all sinking fund for every date, because again, this is going to price to the final maturity. If you forget and you don't make that change, even though we labeled it term, we called it term bond, this is going to assume this is a serial bond, serial bond, serial bond, serial, 5 different serial bonds. Right? So if we just do one more, let's just say it's 65. I'm just going to put term bond. Sure, yep, 60 to 65. Let's say it's a 2. Control C, Control V. And again, if you have this information in Excel, you can always, copy paste. Now, let's say you created a bunch of different bond components and you go, oh, wait a minute, I need to update the rates or whatever. I need to update something within each one. The used to be, unless you had a project finance, you had to kind of go into each bond component and update. But I know I'm skipping a little bit, but I just wanted to show you. We have a modify bonds section, also control B goes into. You can clear all if you want to clear out cash or maturity structure is typically, you'll notice now, let's see, when I scroll down, so here's all the different bond components we've created. Let's say, oh, I made a mistake, I was off. I can modify, I can add it or subtract point, say, 0.05. Hit execute, go in here, you'll see that these have been changed. Also in modify, if you do have MMD yields, now we have a link back in Tools, Preferences, Internet Settings. If you have a TM3 account, you can put in your login name and password. You can automatically download MMD yields. I don't have one, so I can't. If you have yield curve, let's say in Excel and or credit spreads, additional, you can copy and paste, for example, into here as well. So this modified bonds section kind of just gives you different, instead of having to go into each bond component and make any kind of changes, you can do it kind of in one area, and this will save a lot of time. Especially when you start having a bunch of different bond components. All right. Project funds, I'm just going to give it the generic. Different ways to set up a project fund. You may know that this is a $250 million project fund. Not par, but I know what the amount happens to be. And I know starting 7/1/24 to, 5/1/25 monthly. I don't know what the draw requirements are, but I want the program to tell me or to produce what the draw requirements. You can change the weighted, the draw weights, or you may go in thousands. So this is 10 million. Or you say, no, it's going to be, let's say, copy down, 220 million. So you may know what the draw requirements are. Obviously, if you know the draw requirements, you can keep it calculated, or you may know what the par amount is, or we may, in a little bit, when we structure off of revenues, you may just go, I want the excess proceeds to fund the project fund, and you may not even have any draw requirements or draw weights or draw dates. So again, this gives you a multitude of ways to set up, create as many project funds as needed. You may have one project fund with a certain amount, and then you may want, since there's a little bit, after you calculate a little bit of rounding, you may want to also include the excess proceeds. You can do this in one, you can do it in in two separate project funds. So I'm going to set this up more kind of setting up like our tutorials, which is help. If you haven't done so, don't be intimidated or think, oh, look at all the pages and debt size and refunding. Again, we have a number of examples. In each example, every report is included. So that adds a lot of bulk to it. Project finance is not as many pages because it assumes you know already how to set up debt size and refund. Let's get right into the project finance module and let's start including or importing, which you've already created, the refunds and proposed new money. And we also have some video tutorials as well. If you also, you can also email us if, and if we have a little bit more extensive, and I think some of you have already received it, when generally clients ask about training. We have a little link syllabus that says, hey, here's what we recommend, whether it's before you start today, but everywhere from here's where you can get the video tutorials to the actual tutorials, and so forth. So, but again, anywhere in your program, help, email data to DBC. I'm just going to do current document, most selective. So obviously, if this was a project or if this was a refund and you were refunding a number of actual series, refunded series, it would send the refund case plus anything attached to it. So a lot of times you don't need to send your entire database file, which will include all other series that's not even related to this, but it's fine if you do. But so I could just say, training Q2, ignore whatever your issue is, question you have, why am I not producing level net debt service, or whatever it happens to be. You'll go to help, email data to DBC, and then it will show you on your end it's been successfully sent. Our group, not only do we have, kind of the front line, as I mentioned at the beginning of our group that's been here for many decades, we also have kind of backup as well that might be a little bit more on the technical side, but it gets sent to anyone who has or is on the DBC finance support thread, and one of us will reply to the others, I got it. And then a lot of times if we don't need any more follow-up information, we can figure out the problem, reply back to you, and tell you how to resolve it. You'll notice in the toolbar, there's also an email button that you can do instead of help email data to DBC. How do you add or remove? You can right mouse click, customize toolbars, and this allows you to remove and delete and have space and so forth. So it's really customizable to what I'm so, for so many years, we didn't have this email that I'm just so used to using email data to DBC. And also what's great about tutorials, we have keystroke, the different, if you are more into keystrokes, how to access, also README notes. Anytime we have a newer version, we will, we don't just have newer versions because we have nothing to do. It's a lot of times it's specific to improve the program. If we notice any kind of glitch or we notice, hey, here's an issue. For one, it was slugs that we had linked to. There were some the formatting they changed on their end, so we had to kind of do an emergency almost update. But what's great about this is this shows you, you can just see all these updates, changes, and from prior versions. That would also include, any kind of new natural language format, new examples to reference specific things in the program. But I would always take a look at that as well. Okay, so going forward, we can just do debt service reserve fund. Now, we're also going to create a CAPI, capitalized interest fund. Typically, capitalized interest fund, you're going to capitalize interest 100% through a specific date. Well, that specific date also, typically, you have your reserve fund, you're going to have an interest, that's, if it's, gross funded, you're going to have interest that accumulates during that CAPI period. Well, if you don't do anything under application of interest earnings, then the issue is if CAPI takes care of 100% of interest, and during that period you have an interest payment date, and from the reserve fund, where does that interest go? Well, the program, and this is an FAQ, the program and the net debt service report will create what we call a general fund, because you didn't really, basically doesn't know where to go. And it will be put into the general fund until it can be applied towards debt service. So what we suggest is another fund. Now, we've only created a project fund. You can also hard code in the short name. Make sure, though, when we create the CAPI, that the short name is CAPI or whatever it happens to be. Obviously, if it differs and you try to calculate, it'll give you an error message and it'll tell you why. But how are we going to calculate? Go back here. And then after the CAPI, we can then say draw down debt service. So how is the reserve fund going to be calculated? We have in this section you can click on and you can see, we give you a few examples. I would say probably the biggest challenge if you're just starting off with DBC Finance is learning the NLF, the natural language formatting of entering in, the different formulas. Just know that if it doesn't show up, whether it's here or within an expense, that doesn't mean you can't enter it in. It just, we can't provide every conceivable formula example. It would take up so much space. I would get used to typing it in, but obviously you can also select. But I would just recommend, because if you go in here, that works. So, but if I do anything slightly off, it can't go, oh, you meant to, and you heard that noise, it gives you a beep, and also say at the bottom, let's see, you'll see general data error. So it's going to, when we calculate whatever the smaller amount out of line 2, 3, or 4, that's what gets deposited. And it's going to then allocate interest earnings out of the reserve fund to be applied towards cap I. When the cap I is done, extinguished, it will then be applied towards debt service. You can always go down here and go, oh, what was it? 65 was yeah. But again, you hard code in an amount that's set in stone. So what happens a lot of times is down the road, you may change up that final maturity. It may not be to 65. Maybe it's 60 or something that differs. It's not going to update. It's going to assume this is when it gets released. It doesn't matter when the final maturity date of your bonds are. If you leave it blank, it will adjust accordingly. So in this case, 6165. If I delete that term bond, it'll be in, was it 59? Yes. So anything you hard code in, just remember that's set unless you unprotect or you hard code in a different amount or different date. Cap I, typically net funded, and we'll do bond interest accrued through, how about, what was it, 5/1/25. Just like the reserve fund, we even tell you, typically, if it's a reserve fund, you're going to be entering in information up here. If it's a cap I, here. F1, you forget, we even provide quick, simple examples. The difference between the accrued, if you just do bond interest through 5/1/25, it will calculate interest to the nearest interest payment date. The word accrued means, no, I want to calculate to the specific date, even if it's not on an interest payment date. I would just always put accrued, but that's just me. Save expenses. Now I wanted to show you this. Let's see, tools, component gallery. Oop, do not want to do that. Sorry about that. Just delete. All right. All right. So let's say default expense, issuance expense. This is where you can, you can type in, a certain amount, or, um, if I did, remember we had underwriter's discount, average takedown. Let's say it's 5 per bond. What were the other ones? Let's see. Say it's, 2 per bond. And again, you could say 1% of, if you do it wrong, it'll give you that. So it's not just per bond. You can put in an amount. You could say, point. Or you could say it's 10,000. What's great about this, and you can create as many of these as you like, is, instead of, again, it's not hidden. If this ever needs to be cut and pasted into a project finance module, you can do that. Cut, paste. What's also great is we have something called component gallery, which you can save anything that's an icon. You can save in component gallery, and you can retrieve it in different databases, different files. And I've kind of noticed this with itemized expenses. It seems like clients like this the most, because especially if you're doing something where every time you're setting up deals, you're creating multiple itemized expenses. And we would have some clients say, hey, every time I start it up, do I have to just, start from scratch? I got to create 8, 10 different expenses. We said, well, you can go to component gallery, paste it, and then you'll now notice not only do we have standard, if you double click, this is where you can create insurance, ongoing LOC fee. If you double click, whatever the short name you gave it, the long name, and obviously it's blueprint, you would probably have to come in and change the formulas. But this allows you to, anywhere in an icon, you can right mouse click, copy, go into tools, component gallery. In this case, it's a debt size. It's not a refund or finance. And then you right mouse click, and then you can paste it and retrieve it. And it can be in different, I can create from scratch another data file or database, or go into an existing database you've already created. And in the expense section detail, you'll see it in the component gallery. So if I just said, miscellaneous, this could be something that, and this can also, if it's part of underwriters, part of cost of issuance, some kind of a deposit, internal or external, into a fund, you have different options. F1, again, we break that down specifically, help on that information. So if this is included, you can include, exclude. Bond value, for example. Just so creates many expenses, issuance, itemized expenses as need be. We'll get to call provisions when we do, especially set up a refund. But obviously, this is where you would create the call table you would enter in the date and amount, and then you create as many different call tables. Then you go to setup, and this is where you can link to the call table. Additional info, reporting options. You have additional titles. You want to align, even though I'm calculating off a certain, in this case, bond year, but I want to then align it to a different date. You can do that. More importantly, the footnotes. If you have footnotes and you want to cross the board, I could say training. Or you can select specific reports. Same thing with alternate text. If there's anything in the report that is generated text-wise from the program, you can select report, or you can do all reports. Make sure the original text is exactly how it's shown in the report. So if it's on all caps, or each word is only in cap, make sure you type in the original text exactly. So if it was, let's say, the title of the reports, it's in all caps, and you don't want it all caps, well, make sure the original text is in all caps, and you can replace it with whatever you'd like. And then we'll get into other debt service. We're going to pretty soon add existing debt. So at the bottom, at the end, this is where we can determine how we want to solve. I would say, obviously the default is level debt service. Anything other than level or equal, which is, same principal amounts. Anything else, that means you have to have some kind of revenue constraints. And we'll get to an example on that in a moment. So, in this, for example, maximize proceeds. I want to produce X amount of debt service in these years or across the board. How do I do that? You do fill, revenue constraints. You'll put in that cash flow. In a refunding, the default, revenue constraints is the prior debt service, right? Here's the old debt. Let's try to structure the new debt and produce, let's say, level savings. Solution adjustments. A lot of times you'll look at your reports, you'll look at net debt service, and you'll go, this isn't level. Why is it not a level? Well, you didn't adjust ongoing expenses, earnings, and draws. So by default, it's going to be level debt service. And I'll show you, and we'll make this change in a moment. And we'll get to this as well. Got to that. So click calculate, right? And you'll see kind of a snapshot. Obviously, anything that's way out of line, if the expenses you itemized, you didn't, you typed in some kind of an amount, not, thinking it was in thousands, when it's to the penny, you'll go, oh, that should have been, instead of 2 million, let's say, 200,000 or so. You can automatically, don't even really have to look at the reports. You'll go into the expense and make that change. But print, this is where you can start to select your different reports. You can double click, you can select it once, hit the arrow key. We also have, let's see, formula verification. So anytime you see a report that's selected that has parentheses next to it, that means you can modify. I'd always stress when you're trying to verify numbers, it's probably best not to modify to annual, especially if you're trying to, say, tie out interest, right? Interest is based on semi-annual, not annual. But for just training purposes, I just wanted to show you, for example, This is on an annual summary. And then you may go, oh, I want to break out the debt service report detail, which is per bond component. And I intentionally didn't make some changes just to kind of show you some common issues that we've noticed that clients may have, especially starting off. So let me start that. Oh, up in there. It's not responding. Oh, okay. There we go. Table of contents. You've probably all seen this before. Project fund broken out. Now you may go, oh, wait a minute. I don't, I don't want it broken out. I don't want to see the details. I just want to see it, you know, not the details. More times than not, if you have a question about a report, something's included, something's not included, want to view it differently. In this case, I don't want to see details of the underwriter's discount. Print preferences, go into that specific relevant tab. I could say, oh, don't want to do that. You also have it available reports. You will have sometimes hidden reports. So I would also advise after, if you have it in tools, preferences, internet settings, put in all your email support information. When you run something or you go to tools, report preferences, you can see what hidden reports you have. So we go back. Now you'll notice details are no longer shown. Statistics. Oh, I wanted to include one on, yeah. This is one of our newer reports. It used to be, we would have a lot of, questions about, look, I want average coupon or average life per maturity. Well, you had to basically create a bond component per maturity to show that on the bond statistics report. This shows what's included, what's not included. And this is our newest report that's been added a while back. And again, print preferences, you can deselect or select, and this will show you, for example, the average life per maturity, duration per maturity, PV of 1 BP change per maturity. I think this is kind of a helpful report. You'll notice the note that we added in every report, bond pricing. And again, I want to see the sinking fund payment dates. You go to print preferences, bond pricing. You unselect aggregate term bonds, and it will show. Bond debt service. And now, and the bond pricing. Let's show that. I guess we selected it. Let's see. Oh, no. Here we go. Excellent. So detail, broke it out per bond component. This is a serials. Here's the term, 59 and the 65 term. Now, what happens is, we'll get this a lot. Wait a minute, my debt service, it's not level, especially this final, the release of the reserve fund. So as you can see here, the net debt service, everyone knows what the net debt service report is, but it doesn't show how it's structured, right? It's just showing what's included in the net debt service report. If you view the bond solution report, one of the most important reports, just because it shows what's included, what's excluded, and how it's being solved, especially if it's even possible. You'll notice here, if you view your bond, you'll say, where's my ongoing expenses, or where's my reserve fund? Where's my, my interest earnings and draw amounts from my cap I? It's not included. Well, immediately go back. If you did have ongoing, you can adjust debt service. Now, when we calculate, now you'll see net debt service level all the way 7.778 million debt service. So if you set it up correctly, you don't really probably need to view the bond solution report, or if it's mathematically possible. But in a lot of cases, that's not going, that's not going to happen. Now you'll see the debt service adjustments. See how it should be 7.78, just like the net debt service. It will mimic. So you view the bond solution, it shows what's included, what's excluded. Here's the reserve fund. The lesser of test, we'll get to the formula verification. The lesser of should be this 10,375. Apply to cap I, then it draws down debt service. Here's the cap I. Deposited interest, principal, and you have the reserve fund interest earnings to meet the scheduled draws. Project fund, we have the 20 million. Here's the deposit amount. And here it is. So the lesser of, yep, it's the 125% of average annual adjusted debt service. So it shows you maximum annual debt service, this amount, 10%. And the final DSRF deposit, that's the 10, that's the lesser of. So you'll see these are scalar values up front. And then like a cap I, it's a vector ongoing. We have the expense. And then we have the cap I. Oh, did not want to do that. Okay. Okay, there we go. So let's say though we have existing debt service, right? And it can either be from an actual series or some kind of a cash flow. Let me save this. Let me open. I'm going to copy that. So there's two ways of pulling in or entering in existing debt. One, you may have the rates and the amounts, but you don't know what the total debt service amount might be. And then the other, you may have just some kind of cash flow amount that you want to hard code in. So I'm going to show you the two different ways. So I could just say new, and I can see, how about 2015? Actual. Let me stick with the. Let's just say it's like serial. Let's just say it's, I don't know, 55, I guess. Let's just say it's at, doesn't really, I'm just going to put 3% all the way down. You'd have all this information and you would know. You would be hard. This is an actual series. So let's just say it's 2 million. You'd have that at 80 million total. Okay, so save. So in the wrap, how do we pull in existing debt? And our objective is not only do we pull in the existing debt, which is the 2015, but we want to wrap around it and produce overall level aggregate debt service. How do we do that? Well, there's a debt service calculator. You can, if you wanted to, obviously these fall before delivery, but it can get pretty complex. You could say, oh, I only want, out of the 2 million, I only want 1 million to be included. In this case, I'm just going to select the entire serial 55, export. I'm just going to go in here, automatically imports not only the principals, the interest, and the total debt service. Now, when we run it, it's going to say some of this is already expired or, it falls, and that's fine. But let's say you don't have that. Let's say you go, look, I have the amounts. I don't know what the rate is. I just have some kind of a cash flow amount. You can copy paste from Excel into other debt service. You can also link it to other formula, or you may just want to type it in. How do I do that? I don't know what the coupons are, for example. Well, menu, other debt service. Say it's 2018. And again, they don't have to match. They can be different, maturity dates. Let's say let's just say it's 50. It's going to be 15, but you can, again, link it, other formula. You can cut and paste if you want principal, what's the interest, or if it's just the debt service, you're going to hard code all that information in. So 2 different ways if you have existing debt. One, create the actual series, import it through debt service calculator. The other is you can manually or cut and paste or copy paste into other debt service. Now, if you don't do anything, let's see, do that. And then aggregate debt service. And again, I'm trying to show you kind of common issues that come up. So a lot of times you'll just add it and you'll go, wait a minute, this isn't level. I see my wraparound existing debt, my new existing 15 and 18, but that's not level. Exactly. So if we go in after you've included and you go in additional debt service or wrapping, activate wraparound other debt service. Now we calculate it. Now you'll see the 11. Now we can adjust the short first period or long period. Oh, no, that's not getting us. What's going on? Oh, that's level aggregate net debt service. That's why. Yep, 11.996. See it? We have an aggregate net debt service report. That's a hidden report, or you'll have to actually import that from the samples folder wherever your program was downloaded. And that's through tools to find custom reports, but that's something we can get into later. But again, bond solution. If you didn't click wrap around other debt service, you would not see this existing debt service. And that would tell you all you need to know. You go up, instead of just viewing the aggregate debt service report, view the bond solution. You don't see existing debt there, then that means you're not wrapping around to produce this aggregate level debt service wrap solution. Now that it's created, and that's great. Now, going back to our original, let's see, bond debt service. You may go, okay, that's great, net debt service, but I need it to be, let's say, 8 million a year, right? You have specific debt service amounts that you need to produce without exceeding. How do I do that? Well, there's new money. I'm going to do another copy. 2024. So we go into fill. Again, we no longer want level. We want to maximize proceeds. Right? I'm going to, just to make this easier, revenues. And again, right mouse click, enter dates. What do we want? 8 million a year. Obviously, it may not be straight down. If it's increased by a percentage, if you said copy down, I want, starting at 8 million, I want to increase by 2%. You can set it up like that. It's, as long as it's mathematically feasible. Now we'll notice some things here. Okay, so we want it to be 8 million on. Let's see. This happens a lot because you remember a fill is what's the par amount needed in order for me to achieve 8 million in debt each year. It's this amount. Well, the project fund, given all our expenses and reserve, all our fund deposits, it exceeds the par amount. And this is showing you bond debt service. Again, if you just view this report and it works out, you're great. This is within a bond solution. You'll see the constraints. You'll see unused revenues that should be within a bond all the way down, and it is. So that works. Now, what happens a lot of times is it doesn't. Now, obviously, if you wanted to quote, I don't want, you can always fund that into a project fund. We could try to accelerate or deferred, which will not maximize, and it won't produce 8 million each year. It will produce 8 million all perhaps 1 year, which will be the difference, or so you won't have a additional proceeds of greater than a bond. But you can also fund this to cost of issuance, to project fund, and so forth. But what happens a lot of times is, let's say I'm doing something extreme here, 10,000. It'll tell you not all revenue constraints are filled. Well, if you view that's very large on debt service, again, that's not going to, if it doesn't work, it doesn't really tell you why. This is saying we cannot produce, if we bond all the way out to 65, the interest only will blow this revenue constraint. So Phil, not making any other changes, Phil doesn't mean, well, we're going to blow the revenue constraints because we want to automatically always fill to the final. No, this is saying there's just not enough. The revenue constraints is too small. If that's correct, what you have to do is come in here and protect this maturity date from the solution, meaning don't include this maturity when trying to fill, right? And again, this is great. This is showing you, but bond solution report. So if you bond in every year, 26 through 65, to achieve 8 million in debt within a bond, the interest only is 3.726641. So your revenue to bond in this year, it needs to be greater than that to at least bond or have that year included. What is it now? 12, let's see. 30. Okay. And a lot of times it's, let's see, something like that. That's to absorb the rounding amount. So we've, in a nutshell, have kind of gone over wrap, new money, fill. We have a certain amount, 8 million per year. I think this might be a good break. Just like, let's see, how about come back at, I don't know, 12, 10 after 12, and we'll do the refunding. Refunding is really, it's not that difficult at all. It just, it may seem a little more intimidating if you're first starting to use the program, only because you have to create, obviously, the refunded debt, and you have to run everything through a refund case. But now when you create a refund case, it'll automatically create a proposed refunding shell that's attached to it. But it's just a little bit more setting up prep work. It's not more difficult. It just may seem that way at the beginning, just because you have kind of the old debt that needs to be structured. You need to put in the new debt information, and then run everything in the refund case module. So yeah, why don't we come back like at 12:10? Need to make phone call, coffee, bathroom break, all that kind of stuff. And I'll see you like 12:10 in 10 minutes. Sound good? Awesome.
Will you be sending this recording out to us?
I can see about that. I know that I am recording it, and I can talk to our product manager about that. I don't I think we've tried to send it out before I think it was, I don't know. Yeah, let me talk to my product manager on that. And if you guys do want a recording, then definitely send us an email on that. And I'll see if we can get that sent and maybe have it in an easy way instead of trying to, you know, do it multiple times and whatnot. Sound good?
Yeah, I was just asking because there was a few parts which I think I wasn't able to follow you like at the same
Oh,
speed.
okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't think that should be a problem. Um, let's see. What is it, Mike? Where is it? Up. I don't know how to pause it. I know there's a stop recording. I don't. Um, I'll try.